Hello.
No, Doug, it's been a while.
4%. Oh,
Hey, Tommy.
yo.
I anticipate actually a fairly short call today, but we'll see. Hey, Eric. Oh, no, Mike. Hey, Eric.
Hello, Doug.
And Scott.
Oh, Doug.
And Christian.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm getting recorded.
Yes, we are being recorded. They're spying on us. That's not good.
Hey, Doug.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who was that? I was looking down.
It's Christoph.
Oh, Christoph. Hey, Christoph. And Lucas.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Ginger.
Sorry, I was being notified that the meeting is being recorded. That was new.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking with what is the lady's name? I guess Amy is her name at the CNCF, and she was telling me that you can actually have these things not just automatically recorded like they are right now, but automatically uploaded to YouTube as well. And she wanted to know if we were interested in doing that and whatnot. And it sounded interesting, but the problem is, in order to do it, you have to set up a special Google account or a different Google account, and you have to give them information like your phone number and stuff like that. And it's like, I really don't want to do that, so I haven't done it yet. So if somebody has a phone number they don't mind giving to Google, let me know.
But I mean, what's the point? I mean, can't they? This is the CNCF Zoom account, and if it's being recorded, why can't they just give you the recording?
Well, they can. It's just. I think every week Amy does it manually. She'll upload the videos and stuff. But I think she wants to get out of that business, which I totally understand. Right? She wants it to be automated, and actually the workflow guys, they actually are doing it automatically now. Because Timur had no qualms about giving Google his phone number. So
maybe the CNCF needs to get a phone number.
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I didn't actually ask about that. You're right. I should have.
555.
Yeah. Let's see. Hey, Clemens.
Hello.
And Daniel.
Hello.
Hello. Klaus.
Hello.
Hello. Oh wow, that went fast. 3 minutes are up already. It's really weird not seeing like 20 plus people on the list these days. I don't know what's going on. All right, let's get Simon in there, then we'll get started. Hey, Simon.
Hi.
Hello. All right, let's see. John will hopefully show up later. Let's get started. Let's see. Thank you for Scott and John for doing your AIs. Community time. Anything from the community people want to bring up? Okay. We do have an SDK call scheduled for today. There is one item on the agenda. If you guys want to stick around for that, if you're part of the SDK cabal. Otherwise, you'll be able to leave early. Discovery interrupt. Yeah, we didn't really do anything last week, I don't think. So we skipped that one. Nothing to mention there. KubeCon, haven't heard back yet about any co-located events. So let's keep going. I don't see Tim or anybody else from Workflow on, so I think just got to discuss there. All right, before we jump into PRs and stuff, any other topics we want to bring up that I should have added to the agenda? Okay, in that case, let's jump into Clemens' PR. Now, Clemens, there were some comments made on there both last week and this week. I haven't seen you make any updates based upon those comments yet. Did you get a chance to review those, or?
I shipped 2 products, and so therefore the answer is no.
Man, I can hear the
Yes.
the violins.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've been busy. I understand. Okay.
But more than usual. Like I have an actual reason this time. I shipped product, and I shipped Cloud Events product too.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I did notice your tweet. So congratulations.
Yeah, I was going to say, and tweeted a lot. So
I'm sorry.
not sorry, just recognizing the effort.
Funny. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. Okay. So do you? Yeah. I feel uncomfortable merging a PR with open issues or open questions. Do you?
Can we do the game of me addressing those things tomorrow until tomorrow?
We could try to do that. Yes. As long I think what we'd have to do is say, okay, if you can address those concerns by early enough tomorrow morning, for at least for the U.S. West Coast folks, because I think Remy might be the only other person aside from myself that, no, I think Eric actually added a comment too. So if you can address those early enough for the people that commented, for them to have time to respond tomorrow with an affirmative, yep, I love your answer, or no, I don't like it. As long as there are no, I hate your answers, then if everybody else agrees, then yeah, we could play the game of merging offline.
Then let's do that.
Okay. The one question.
I'm sorry, I didn't have the time.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I just feel bad because I know you've been waiting on this and I don't want to delay it any longer. So if everybody's okay with the async stuff, that's fine. I just had one question. Actually, let me not jump the queue. So Remy's not on, but Eric, you did make at least a couple of comments in there. Are there any questions you want to raise for Clemens on the call right now to get a verbal response, or do you just want to wait for him to respond offline?
I can discuss either way. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Let's see if we can quickly find one.
My biggest thing is that the way that the replication models are presented kind of has this like in-tier model interaction implied, and there isn't any space for more of a log interaction, log-based interaction streaming. Like throughout cloud events, that's been a transport concern, so we didn't think about it. But now as this is being designed, that's been excluded, and so that's what that comment was about. I was asking whether that was an intentional thing, whether anyway.
So what do you mean? Like what was the snapshot or ETL type of interaction? There's a change, and then you notify about the change.
Right. So that would be kind of in the push model, right, or in the cloud event model. But can I? There's nothing of a kind of offset that this. That the events, I know that would be kind of internal implementation thing a little, but well, it depends on your perspective. But there's no kind of, can I ask for everything since this last update if you're in the pull model? So you go to Kafka, you say, hey, this is the last offset I read on this partition. Can you give me everything since then?
That is indeed an implementation detail. So you can go and push all the. I mean, you can go and raise all the events into Kafka, and then or into Event Hubs, or into Pravega, and then you can go and walk up to the broker and say, please give me everything from 8 UTC on, and you're going to get your events.
Mhm.
So I don't think anything here precludes you from doing that. But I also don't think we need to have a particular facility here because that is something that those brokers offer you as a feature. You only need to raise events out, and then
Okay, so I think what you're saying, if I understand properly, is that the keeping of a history would be something that is on the receiver, on the entity that's trying to replicate.
yeah,
Rather than something that we would ever ask the replication source to provide.
yes. So I think that the what we need to define here is what happens. You report the state change, and then how you react to the state change is that you subscribe as another implementer of a registry. You will go and take the external state change from a different authority, and you will go and enter that into your registry. I think that's the model I'm describing.
Right. Which I think you just said is omitting the kind of model that I was asking about.
But you can, if you want to go and event source your registry, you can totally take that exact same stream and you can put that into an event store, and then you can go and rebuild your registry from that event store.
Yeah, of course.
I think this completely supports this. It's just that I am
as a registry producer or a maintainer of a registry, I could also do that and offer that to my clients, right? And this is not presenting that as among the options the implementers should consider.
I will be happy. So, do you think I should mention that?
I would appreciate that being there.
Okay, so I'll go and add that as effectively kind of a non-normative comment of like, here's the thing you could do.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Thanks for doing the work.
Fantastic. All right.
Okay. Since Remy's not on, was that the only question you had, Eric, recently? I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, that pretty much covers.
Okay.
That's the only one I added after kind of. There's kind of this, maybe Clemens can describe it better, but as I understand it, he kind of boiled the world and everything changed and there was kind of cruft of what will comments.
Okay, yep. Okay, now the only other thing worth mentioning here, I guess, is I had a question for you, and I'm pretty sure I'm just not following something, so it's probably a user error, but I apologize, didn't notice this before, but I don't understand this. Why couldn't you just do a get to the URI? Why do you have to go through this indirection?
Oh, this is the
because doesn't every version of the schema have its own like real URL, and then if you leave off the version string or whatever it's called, then you get the latest?
the schema version URI. Can you go to the schema version URI?
Yeah, I think where was it? Section 222.
I'm bad at context switching.
Okay, hold on a sec.
And then also containing the schema authority, and
yes,
that might be different.
Correct. So the schema version URI is makes the schema unique, right? So the schema version URI is a URI. It's an identifier. Scott, I know that I released 2 products.
Oh, no, okay. No, he's responding to me saying why I didn't understand his reference to the number 2. I didn't realize he was talking about you. So,
So it's a URI, so it's a unique identifier, but it's not a URL. So to get at the schema, because the authority is in there, right? To get at the schema, you need to actually you need to be able to inquire your local registry for that schema. So that schema has a unique identifier, which is a URI. But if you want to get that schema from your local endpoint, you have to go and specify the URI as a parameter.
okay. Okay. So conceptually, I think I understand the difference between URI, URL, and I understand these are URIs. Therefore, you have to sort of munge it together with a URL to get it. That part I understand. But, and I apologize, I can't remember everything about this, but doesn't every version of a schema in the registry, or I'm sorry, isn't every version of the schema in the registry accessible by a URL, by a unique URL?
Yes, so it is accessible through a URI, but you might not be able to get to it. So one of the notions here is that you have one of the things that the replication needs to be able to help with is you are talking to a broker and the broker is in your private network.
Okay.
You don't have access to the internet at all because you have a network administrator who's really evil and doesn't give you network access. And then you're also pulling the data out of an endpoint, which is under the same conditions. And so there's now a replication route where those events travel, and some of those may include or not include the open internet, but ultimately you can't talk to any schema registry which is public or has a public endpoint or knows your URI, right? So you might not be able to even get to yes, you might theoretically be able to get to that place that is the authority for your schemas, but in many cases you can't. So you need to have effectively a way to talk to a registry which is co-located with the endpoint from which you are pulling the events. And that is why that exists. So you get a URI that is indicating the name of your schema, effectively the unique global identifier of your schema. But the only way for you to obtain that schema is a local endpoint inside of your VNet that you're currently in.
Okay.
That is why that is so.
Okay, using the phrase global unique identifier helps me understand where it's used for. Okay, got it. Perfect. Thank you very much, sir.
And literally mean universal resource identifier as a thing, and it might also serve as a URL, and in most simple cases it will, but in all the cases where really you need to have replication, you are in a place where you need to have multiple registries, and if you have multiple registries, then you likely will have a reason to go and pull the schema from your local endpoint rather than the central place where the home of the schema is. That is why you need that.
So these operations you're talking about here, are you talking about operations on a schema registry, or are you specifically saying that this operation right here is only for a non-internet accessible registry, or are you saying that these are all actually for both?
You can always, so all the schemas that are sitting inside of a registry, you can always get through this operation. And there may also be in the special case where you are addressing the schema directly under its schema version URI, which you can also construct with this, and where the authority is literally the address, the authority in the URI is literally the address of the schema registry that is hosting it, then you can also do the get on that schema using its version path. So you can get it both ways.
And that thing, the latter part of what you just mentioned, that's mentioned somewhere here in this document too, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
So this is literally just for this is the necessary the necessary extension of the interface so that you can actually get at schemas that are stored in the registry, even though the URI is seems to be pointing to a different networking place, which it is not, because it's really just the URI.
Perfect. Okay, that helps me understand. Thank you very much. Okay.
And I understand that that's complicated, and we could probably go and introduce a different URI scheme for this, but then that gets even more complicated because people don't understand. So
No, it's fine. It was just, so if instead of URI here, it said something like unique ID or something like that, or even UUID, then I don't think I would have been confused. But the fact it said URI threw me a little, but now that you've explained it, it makes perfect sense. So it was me, so don't worry about it.
it's an I, it's an identifier.
I know, but never mind. Yes.
You
Yes.
lived through the entire XML nonsense, and you still.
I know. Yes, I know. Don't mock me too much, okay? Yes. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I was mocking you earlier, so it's all fair. So any other questions for Clemens on this?
Sorry, Clemens. You asked if it was okay if we just kind of say that it's something you could do, and I feel shy about asking, but the thing that I would really like, and I'm not saying this is reasonable to ask, is for some of the things that would allow for maintaining the kind of consistency and ordering and things like that, that in an event source system I really like to have or need to do a lot of work to establish. If that was something that could be asked of the implementers, that would make my life a lot easier. It seems like that's asking a little, that'd be kind of tail wagging the dog kind of a request. But that was the sort of thing that I was noticing wasn't there. There were no affordances for those sorts of concerns, and they're a lot easier to maintain than they are to create.
There's an authority, and then there's also a timestamp because it's a cloud event that we're raising, which means at least time-based order you're getting.
Right.
So that's something we already have as a facility. Are you then asking for there to be a sequence ID of the change?
I would prefer a sequence ID over a timestamp every day, but
because since we're effectively only replicating changes to, like, since all the objects are immutable, there's only update, there's inserts and deletes. And there is a version implied in the schema version, right? So there is already some notion of sequencing here.
Okay. Yeah.
So
I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot about that detail of it. That's a significant point. I apologize.
No, that's off. It's good. All good. If you I would like to get this in, if possible. I'm going to address the other comments, and then if you wargame this on an event store, and you see that there's a gap, we'll close that gap.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and I kind of following on what you just said there, Clemens, this is still just a draft. We are not officially approving this as 1.0 or anything. So obviously changes still come in. So we don't need to set too high a bar. So let me ask the question. Does anybody else have any other comments, questions, concerns? Okay. Is there any objection then to approving this conditionally on Clemens addressing the open questions by early enough for tomorrow, so that I guess myself, Remy, and Eric, I think you had a couple of questions in there aside from based upon this conversation. If he addresses those three people's concerns, is there any objection then to approving this and getting it possibly merged by the end of the day tomorrow? Okay.
No objection. I think that he can take my name off the list as someone he needs to satisfy.
Okay. So let's do this before I forget. Oops. What is today? 5:27 call.
Thank you.
Early tomorrow. Is that a word? Questioners? Yeah. Questioners. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Thank you all for that. And Scott, I know sometimes you need to leave early, so let's get to your thing. Hopefully it's easy. Would you like to explain this one?
I contributed a simple version of a pull request template. So you'll be presented with this if you make a PR as the piece that, when you're making the PR, this is the little summary section. And then it just reminds you to add the release note here. So you add the text, and then this, what's between the 3 ticks and release note will be extracted by the release note extractor.
Okay.
Which is the second part. You can run it as an action, or you could run it locally, but it's a bit to set up.
Okay. And yep, cool. Okay, you answered my questions. Cool, thank you. Does anybody, let me hide my comments. Does anybody have any questions about this? Obviously, if it doesn't work, we'll find out when we merge it and then tweak it as necessary, but it seems straightforward to me.
One question I had, so, it's a bunch of copyright, yada, yada, but this is copied from Knative and it's Apache. So I think the appropriate Apache way is to attach the Cloud Events authors to the top of the copyright and keep the original authors, or you have an authors file in the repo, but we don't have that. So I kept the copyright to comply with Apache 2 and added us.
I think that sounds right. Does anybody have any different opinion or alternative suggestion? Okay. Any questions or comments for Scott? Okay. Any objection to approving then? Cool. Thank you for that, Scott. I appreciate it. Now we just need to get some PRs with that stuff in there. All right, John. Oh,
and you can also modify past PRs and add release notes if you wanted to.
Ooh, good point. I like that idea. Maybe we'll do that. So we did, actually, let me ask you a question. So when we go to run it, I haven't actually played with GitHub Actions pretty much at all. So when I go to run it, it's going to prompt me for the starting Nanisha?
Yeah, there's a little pop-up box that when you push the button, it asks you, technically, if you are doing the right branching strategy, it'll just detect it correctly, but you probably want to pick 2 SHAs that you want to look between.
Got it. Okay, easy enough. All right, good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. All right, go away. All right, John, are you able to talk to?
I am, although the intention for today was that I wouldn't really say very much. Hopefully folks have had a chance to look at this and either consider that I'm barking down completely the wrong tree as to what we're trying to achieve or not. I haven't actually proposed anything yet, which is why there's not very much to say. But thank you for reviewing, Doug. And basically what I'm looking for today is approval to take this forward and start thinking about things to actually propose.
And would anybody else like to chime in?
And my guess is secretly that no one else has found the time to look because we're all very busy. I'm exactly the same.
Yes.
But in that case, that's fine, and I will just go ahead and assume I might just be wrong about it all. And that's fine.
Well, yeah, one of the interesting things about organizations like this is oftentimes people won't chime in until they have something concrete to look at. I mean, a concrete proposal to look at, which is fine. That's why typically we focus on PRs instead of issues. I guess since I'm the only one that commented on here, I'll jump in. I think the things I highlighted are the main points, at least from my perspective. And I don't necessarily think we have to version things like the subscription API at the same time as the Cloud Events API, because I think those are separate enough specs, even though they play together nicely, hopefully. I don't think they have to be necessarily versioned together. But it does seem like it makes sense to version the Cloud Event groupings of specs together, meaning the spec along with the bindings.
Potentially.
I think that's going to get funky to me.
One of the interesting things I commented on in Protobuf batch, I can't remember, was at least one of the batch bindings we've got said that all Cloud Events within a batch have to have the same spec version, and I found that surprising. And it's the kind of thing, it's really hard to second guess what versioning is going to be like until we've got a V2. You know, pre-release to V1, you learn a few things, but it's really V1 to V2 or to 1.1. You know, what would it mean to have a 1.1, etc. That's where we find out what we should have done for 1.0. Mm-hmm. So I will only be able to speculate a bit as well. But yeah, I think I agree about groups of things being versioned together. Now, given that we only have one name that we can put on the branch, I wonder whether our branching approach of having a version in there may not be ideal, but I will think about this and muse for a while and then come up with potentially multiple proposals.
Yeah, and I think you're you focusing on the only having one branch name kind of identifies the problem that I keep thinking about, which is is that going to force us to have multiple repos? And that right. May be why we have to and ultimately have multiple repos, and so be it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else want to raise any questions or comments for John about this, or just have him go off and come up with something concrete to poke fun at?
And if you have, if you want to just throw a load of comments into the doc saying, these are scary versioning situations that I have come up against in the past, that's precisely the kind of feedback that would be really useful to try to mitigate against some of our previous experiences. I suspect that everyone in this meeting has battle scars from versioning in the past.
Yes.
Yeah. Certainly for the core spec to change version numbers, something very dramatic needs to happen.
Yeah.
Some process stuff.
Yeah, and that's why I think you even talked about it in here somewhere, John, where you started talking about, where was it? We don't really follow SemVer. It's really odd that we don't change the minor version number, blah, blah, blah. And you're right, it is freaking weird, but we did it for a reason, right? We don't want to have people to change their version string every single time, right?
Absolutely. And I suspect that possibly in retrospect, we should have made something around the spec version attribute that it did have a minor version number that was useful. So a V1 should be able to recognize a V1.1, but know that it may be missing some stuff, and a V1.1 can consume a 1.0. And yeah, I'm not sure. That's clearly not something that we can change now. 1.0 is 1.0, and I suspect we can't put anything in other than 0.0 after 1. Maybe we'll do something slightly different for 2 if we ever get to 2.
Right.
I note that XML 1.1 fixes real problems, but doesn't seem to be adopted widely, even years and years later. So it may well be that 1.0 is all there is ever.
Yeah, so I was just about to mention that example. Like XML is a great, like stability is quality, and what they've done is obviously to go and do the what are we now, like 8th edition of XML 1.0. I think that's where they are now. So that's stability is a feature.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, any other comments you want to bring up on the call right now? Otherwise, please comment offline. All right, not hearing anything.
Cool.
Thank you,
Thanks,
John,
folks.
for taking the effort though to write it up. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and to set expectations, don't expect a load of proposals by next week or anything. It's likely to take multiple weeks before I find enough time to think things through. I find versioning very, very hard.
Yep, understood. Okay.
Maybe it's a good time to start discussing the fixed version in the batch as well that John brought up, because we're already on the version topic.
I'm sorry, which issue?
John mentioned it quickly. There's an issue in our repo. So when we send a batch, currently we specify that all events inside the batch needs to be of the same version, and John took issue with that. We don't have to discuss it. Well, maybe a good point in time.
Well, but is there actually an issue for that?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, there it is.
This one, yeah. Yeah, John, maybe you want to speak to it, and I can.
I have nothing new or interesting to say about it right now. I may have more to say about it in the future. I mean, to be fair, I would hope that by now all SDKs are producing 1.0, so we shouldn't need to worry about pre 1.0 events. And I think it's going to be at least a couple of years, I would suggest, before we do 2.0. So during that time, it matters not a jot, because all the events will be 1.0 and that's all there is. But I would definitely like to make sure that by the time we consider 2.0, we try to work this out again.
Okay.
And do shout if I'm wrong about pre 1.0 events basically being obsolete now. The SDK, the C# SDK took the decision not lightly to only support 1.0 from now on, because it made so many things much simpler because of the simplicity, the simplified attributes. If there are well-used SDKs producing 0.3, etc., then please let me know.
Yeah, well, that's basically my point. It makes a lot of things a lot simpler if you only use exactly one version. So I think if a batch only contains one version, it's much easier in all regards. So if you start introducing batches with different versions, I think
the reason that it was simpler for the SDK to only support 1.0 was because 0.3 attributes could support maps and things, if I remember rightly. But I think
exactly.
if the SDK supported 0.3 and 1.0 as individual events, I don't think it would be any harder to support both of those within one batch. I view a batch as if you would be able to support two events sent separately, then it feels easy enough to consume two events with different versions that happen to be sent in a batch. But I may be missing something.
I guess what you said is true. We don't really know what the difference will be, so it's hard to argue about. Well, my feeling is what Clement said is stability is a feature. So I think if we really go for a version change, then it must be a bigger change, and then it becomes, then we run into the same issues that we have from 0.3 to 1.0. is we're gonna have big changes that will actually make things harder, and maybe it will be really hard for an SDK, or it will
possibly. I would hope that even in 2.0, we wouldn't be changing the spec version attribute, which I think that was another thing that at one point it was called something else, and that made it really, really hard to support multiple versions nicely. For 2.0, I'm assuming we will still have it called spec version, and it will have a value of probably 2.0 or v2.0, whatever. But anyway, I'm very happy to punt on this discussion until we know something about what something beyond 1.0 looks like.
Yeah, let's agree on that point.
Okay, cool.
Okay, we agree to do nothing. I could do that. All right, cool. Any other topics you want to bring up at all then? Because otherwise we're at the end of the agenda. Okay, just last bit of business. Lance, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
All right, and how are you there? I think I saw you.
Hey,
Yeah,
sorry
there
about
you go.
that.
Yep, not a problem. All right. As I said, there is one topic for the SDK folks. So if you're not interested in SDK stuff, you are free to go and have a nice weekend and rest of your day. Otherwise, if you are an SDK person, please stick around. Jem had one question he wanted to bring up. Where was it? Did it go away?
You'll have a good Memorial Day.
Yes, yes, yes. For the US folks, have a good day off on Monday. Where was the issue? Oh, here it is. So I'll let you read this. He was wondering about supporting OpenTelemetry. Does anybody have any thoughts on this?
Only that I try to avoid extra dependencies like the plague. And I'm assuming this would be an extra dependency in some way or other. Maybe not. Maybe I don't know. I should know more about OpenTelemetry than I do, but I can see it potentially being difficult. I think it would at least make sense for each SDK to have an issue in the repo saying, please consider supporting OpenTelemetry, and we should actively work on investigating what it would take.
Would you be, I'm trying to channel Jem here, would you be okay with a statement in there that encouraged people to support it? Or I should say, if they were going to support something in that space, that they choose OpenTelemetry as their preferred implementation
absolutely.
choice?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I don't know if you've noticed, Doug, Daniel has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Daniel.
My experience is Daniel normally knows more than I do about these things.
Okay, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I also work with the OpenTelemetry Ruby SDK group. So yeah, Jem's right. They do have a kind of a null implementation pattern where there's a they have in general the SDKs have a library that's just the API with no implementation behind it, and then there's various implementation libraries that you can add. So yes, there would be a dependency, but it would just be on this empty shell interface library. That said, I'm also I'm a little bit unclear about what instrumenting cloud events SDKs would actually mean. Like, what are we instrumenting? We're like, in my mind, the SDKs are serializers, deserializers for cloud events, and there's no control flow that's necessarily built into the SDK. So it's a little bit unclear to me what this actually means.
Okay, Lance, your hand's up. Do you want to try to answer that one?
Yeah, I was kind of asking the same question. Like, what exactly does this mean? Is it distinct from the distributed tracing extension?
Anybody answer that? I know nothing about this space, so I can't answer it. Anybody else want to chime in?
Wasn't distributed tracing already combined with OpenTelemetry?
Oh, well, perhaps maybe I'm not.
I think that I could be mistaken, by the way, but I think that happened. I want to say that happened end of 2019, beginning of 2020.
But there's distributed tracing as a library versus distributed tracing extension attributes that we've currently got, but that Clemens might be addressing at some point.
Yeah, that's actually what I'm asking about, is the extension attributes. Is this any different than that? And yeah.
I'll have to go back and read what Clemens, I may have missed something. So I'll go back and read that before I comment more on that.
So to answer your question here, is this distinct from distributed tracing? Do you mean distributed tracing as a concept, or the distributed tracing extensions that we define?
Specifically the extensions, like what is, maybe I just don't understand what's being asked for here with instrumentation with open telemetry. I just don't really understand what that means beyond tracing. And if it's tracing, then is that not just the distributed tracing extension? But
So the Golang SDK, you can enable the OpenTelemetry package that exposes things like send counts and other telemetry kind of county things that are interesting. You can even go as far as kind of seeing stack traces and where the code makes time happen.
That's pretty cool. But that sounds very specific to just a feature of the Golang module, or is that something that's part of the spec in some way?
That's just the code in Go, and it exposes it out a endpoint that OpenTelemetry can slurp up.
So isn't Gem basically asking for the ideal situation where all SDKs do what the Go SDK did and expose those endpoints with the data?
Well, it's weird because a lot of so in most cases, if you don't have a client wrapper that kind of manages the protocol lifecycle for you, you don't really have a reason to do that. Right. So if you just implement the in and out of the protocol buffers to intermediate format, there isn't really a reason to expose OpenTelemetry.
Right. For example, in the JavaScript SDK, we don't, well, there is, but it's deprecated. We don't have, like, for example, a receiver that opens up a network port and receives incoming connections. We have an API that allows users to provide some receiver that has, a given interface, and we can read connections from there. Read incoming, requests from there. But we don't actually do any of the networking in the JavaScript SDK.
Yeah, whereas Go, we do. And so alongside the port that you expose that would consume cloud events, you can also expose a port that Prometheus could go and scrape and get metrics from the SDK.
Got it. Okay, that helps me. Thank you. Okay. Is there anything else we should write in the notes back to Gem so we can look at this later? Or is that pretty much it? So let me turn this around. Does anybody know, does any other SDK do the networking stuff like Go does? Or is Go unique in that respect?
It's fairly unique in that way.
Okay.
I mean, you can use it exactly like you might with the Java or the C# SDK. You don't have to bring all the other bits.
Okay.
I think that's partly because, and Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like the networking, the HTTP bits in Golang are pretty widely used and at that level, whereas in, like, for example, JavaScript, if you're dealing with HTTP, you're probably using some framework on top of the Node.js HTTP raw objects. And so it doesn't really make sense to choose one framework over another for JavaScript.
Yeah, that's mostly true. There's a couple competitors that implement the networking stack, but for the most part, most people just use the built-in networking pieces.
Yeah.
Okay. The interesting thing is that the client doesn't really know about the protocol. It speaks through an interface that you give it, and that interface could be implemented by Kafka and Nats and AMQP and other things. And then it kind of gets trickier because AMQP has several libraries that implement the AMQP protocol. So you could implement a wrapper that implements our interface and pass that to the client. And you could have two clients that are both speaking AMQP, but on two different libraries.
And that's all actually doing the instrumentation, no matter what the protocol then.
Yeah, we observe at the client level. So we kind of see the ins and outs of how many errors happened and what the response was, if we can slurp it out. And then there's a hook for each transport to decorate its observability points onto that passed in, or that object that then gets trickled up to the exposed endpoint that you can expose on a port that then Prometheus goes and pulls from.
And that only works if you well, let me say it this way, that doesn't work if you're using it in the way you just said. Like, you could use it similar to the Java or the C# libraries that are not actually
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, you can kind of, if you read the code enough, you could go and kind of expose the same thing. So like, for example, if you had an application that was already exposing metrics, you probably don't want to expose a second endpoint. So you can go and register the views that we're creating, and then you can expose it on your existing endpoint if you wanted to. And there's ways to do that because everything's exported. So I don't know. It's like we kind of went a little too far, and we've made a function framework in Go for cloud events that's transport agnostic. If you want to opt into all of the magic, you can strip all that stuff off and just deal in the bindings piece that the spec specifies.
So I mean, my feeling is, on the instrumentation and tracing bits, like, I think without some sort of spec that sort of transcends any specific SDK, it would be difficult for all of the SDKs to implement it in a common way.
It's true, and we used to instrument a bit more, but it turns out that there's a bit of an overhead to do like instrumentation stack tracing in the actual call stacks. And so that's now an opt-in thing, and we've removed it from some of the deep down core pieces because they weren't really being used, and it was only interesting to help debug the SDK implementation. So I guess the follow-up here is we should ask Gem exactly the kinds of open telemetry metrics they're interested in looking at, because I don't think it's not the question of making sure that the event itself has stack traces. I think this might be around what the code is doing. And so it'd be nice to clarify that.
Okay, that makes sense. I'll ping Gem after the call and make sure he looks at the notes and looks at your question, Scott.
Yeah, because is Gem interested in throughput or time to decode or the tracing and push traces for the event itself? Mm-hmm. It's like two different things you can do with open telemetry.
Makes sense. Okay. I think we finished that one. Are there any other topics people want to bring up at all relative to SDK work? Yes.
I have I don't know. I don't know.
You have 7 minutes or more technically.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
You sure? Okay.
We're chugging away. Progress there hasn't been a lot of code added on my side because it just kind of works at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And we find little minor things, and we'll do a release every now and then, but our releases have been more like every several weeks instead of every other week. So that's been nice.
Yeah. Stability is good. Okay. In that case, I think we're done. Thank you all for joining, and we'll talk again next week, I guess. Although, Klaus, next week, Thursday is a holiday in Germany, isn't it?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. So we may not have the German folks on the call. So enjoy your
Yes.
time off.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Bye, everybody. Have a good rest of your day and weekend. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.